Okay, so imagine this. A finely tuned orchestra, right? Playing beautifully, everyone knows their part, the conductor's leading, perfect harmony.
Yeah, a powerful image.
Then picture the conductor steps away, and instantly it just dissolves, pure noise. And that image actually connects directly, maybe surprisingly, to the challenges facing communities today, especially, in this era of, well, fluid affiliations and maybe come as you are spirituality. It's quite a metaphor, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And what our sources are really highlighting here is this quiet tension. It's right there at the heart of so many modern gatherings.
Attention. How so?
Well, we deeply long for belonging, right? And we celebrate grace instinctively.
Yeah.
But there's also this resistance. We often resist commitment, and let's be honest, we kind of shrink back from correction.
Yeah, correction's a tough one.
Definitely.
Well,
So our churches, our groups, they can end up feeling familiar, sure, but not really formational. They're friendly, absolutely, but maybe not foundational.
so you feel connected,
Maybe.
but not actually committed.
Exactly. That's the core of it.
And this gets urgent, doesn't it? For us as learners trying to figure this out. It's not just theory. We see it happening.
Oh, you do.
Groups that were once thriving, they unravel. And it's not usually for lack of vision or even warmth, but it's this lack of, well, structure.
Yeah.
Those essential disciplines.
Which brings us right into today's deep dive. We're going to unpack this really powerful and honestly often counterintuitive set of disciplines, a triad.
Okay.
Our source material calls them the lifeblood of communities that last. Communities that actually transform people and bear witness in the world.
And those three are
Covenant, correction, and communion.
covenant, correction, communion. Got it.
And we'll also explore some parallel ideas, equally crucial. Leadership, liturgy, and life together, and crucially, why these aren't roadblocks to growth like some might think.
Right. Not obstacles.
No, they're actually essential building blocks, foundational.
So think of this deep dive as maybe your shortcut. A way to get well-informed on why the very things we might instinctively fear or maybe try to avoid are actually the keys to deep belonging, to real spiritual flourishing.
It's a paradigm shift for many.
So just imagine for a second a gathering where you know you belong, truly, and you know why. Where course-correcting each other in grace isn't something you dread, but it's seen as this profound act of love, where shared moments become like a forge, where hearts are shaped and sent back into the world aflame with purpose. What really stands out to you when you hear that description?
That sense of purpose, definitely, and the shaping.
Okay, let's start by really digging into this problem, this drifting from depth.
Yeah.
You mentioned that quiet tension, that push and pull,
Right.
wanting belonging, resisting commitment, celebrating grace, but shrinking from correction, sharing communion, maybe, but not really sharing life in that deep, covenantal way the early church modeled. What are the immediate results of that drift?
Well, the sources don't mince words. They're pretty blunt.
Okay.
It leads directly to churches feeling, just as you said, connected but not committed. And small groups, while they might spark some energy initially,
Yeah, you see that.
but they just lack endurance. They fizzle out. There's a hard truth here that comes through. Community without covenant will eventually fracture.
Wow.
A church without correction will quietly rot from within.
Oof, that's stark.
It is. And communion without shared accountability loses its sacred power and drifts into sentiment. That image of a church quietly rotting from within, it's chilling.
It really is. And I think for many of us, part of the challenge is this really attractive myth, isn't it? That
Yes.
structure somehow gets in the way of
It's a
spirituality.
seductive myth.
Yeah, like true encounters, real moments, they have to be spontaneous,
Yeah.
right? Unbounded by any formality. It's almost like we're allergic to rules sometimes.
And, we have to acknowledge where that comes from. Often it stems from genuine burnout, hurt, or disillusionment with systems that were too rigid or maybe even abusive.
That's a fair point.
Absolutely. That instinct to find something real, something less structured, it's completely valid. But, and this is the key warning from the sources, stopping at just potlucks and casual fellowship risks mistaking the appetizer for the feast.
Appetizer for the feast. I like that.
Yeah, it means you get the mingling, the friendliness, but you're missing the main course,
Yeah.
the full, nourishing meal that actually forms you, sustains you. It's like a spiritual book club where nobody actually reads the book.
Right. You get the chat, the coffee.
Exactly. The camaraderie's there, but not the deep dive, not the transformation.
Okay, so if the potluck is just the appetizer, how do we get to the main course? And here's where the sources offer this really surprising twist, maybe even countercultural. What if the very things we've often been told are optional, or maybe even outdated like formal covenants? What if they are the actual lifeblood of communities that last?
It's a profound reframe, isn't it? To speak of covenant is quite literally, as the sources say, to speak God's language.
God's language.
Yeah. Our sources trace this right through Scripture. You see God establishing these deep agreements, these covenants with Abraham, Noah, Moses, all the way up to Christ in the New Covenant.
Right. It's central theme.
Absolutely central. And the consistent thread. Structure preceded flourishing in God's story with humanity. He don't just say, hey, go be a people.
Yeah.
He said, here is our relationship. Here are my promises to you, and here are your responsibilities within that relationship. Structure was foundational.
So if God operates that way in covenant, then it follows that to belong to the church is to enter a covenantal community.
Precisely.
So it's not just like joining a club,
Yeah.
a voluntary association.
No, it's much deeper. It's mutual obligation rooted in divine promise. And the early church really got this. The sources point to Acts.
Acts 2, maybe.
Yeah, Acts 2.42, where it says they devoted themselves. And the Greek word there, presbyterio, means stubborn persistence, like clinging to something. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, the fellowship, breaking bread, and prayer. That's serious commitment.
Stubborn persistence. So what does that kind of devotion look like for us today?
Well, take church membership, for instance. It's not meant to be a contract. A contract is transactional, right? It's rooted in self-interest. What do I get out of this?
Okay.
Instead, membership, viewed through a covenant lens, is a solemn vow to walk with, serve, and be formed by others.
A vow.
Yes. A covenant basically declares, I am yours, and you are mine even when it costs me. It actually bestows identity, like when God told Israel, you will be my people, and it clarifies purpose, turning that identity into a vocation, a calling. It's about being deeply intertwined.
This really does push back hard against that myth of structure-free spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely dead.
Because the sources make it so clear. The Spirit does not float in a vacuum. He filled it.
Great way to put it.
Think about Genesis 1. The Spirit hovers over the chaos. And what emerges? Order. Structure.
Or Exodus 31, the Spirit filling the craftsman.
Right, to build the tabernacle. According to specific patterns, not just randomly. Even the Apostle Paul, when he's addressing the chaos in Corinthian worship.
1 Corinthians 14.
Exactly. He corrects the disorder. He reminds them, God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. And all things should be done decently and in order. Structure isn't the enemy of the Spirit. It's often the vessel.
So the Spirit animates the structure, turns form into life.
That's the idea. And the New Covenant, it doesn't get rid of structure. It fundamentally transforms it from the inside out. Jesus himself said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments.
John 14.15.
Right. Grace doesn't mean no rules or no boundaries. Instead, grace energizes obedience from the inside out. So covenantal church membership, seen this way, actually gives grace a context to flourish. It prevents that drift.
The drift we talked about earlier.
That inevitably happens when you have grace without form results. It's like a river, you know.
Yeah.
Without banks, it just spreads out, becomes a marsh, loses its power.
But with banks with structure.
It flows powerfully towards its destination. Okay, let's tackle the next one, the one that really makes people squirm. Correction.
Ah, yes. The C word in community.
Right. It's often avoided, seen as, you know, archaic, maybe even offensive in today's world. But what's truly fascinating here is how the sources flip that script.
They do.
They portray correction as a mature expression of grace. They quote Hebrews. The Lord disciplines the one he loves.
Hebrews 12. It's not punishment in the punitive sense, but paideia, the Greek word for training, shaping, educating.
Training, shaping.
Yeah.
And crucially, it presumes belonging. You're only corrected because you're in the relationship, because you matter enough to be shaped. It's actually an affirmation of your place.
That's a very different perspective. It's valuing someone.
It's the ultimate act of valuing someone's growth, their potential. And Jesus himself, he gives us the blueprint for restoration. It's right there in Matthew 18.
Matthew 18, the process.
Yes, a clear step-by-step process. First, go privately to the person who sinned against you. Discreetly, respectfully, lovingly. The aim is reconciliation.
Just one-on-one. Initially, yes. If they don't listen, then take one or two others along. This introduces accountability, helps ensure fairness, helps discern the truth of the matter.
Okay, witnesses.
Right. And if they're still unrepentant after that, then tell it to the church community. And even that is presented as a final communal invitation back into restoration. It's not about public shaming or kicking them out.
So the goal is always restoration.
Always. It's what the sources call courageous kindness. This kind of biblical correction, it flows from agape love, that self-giving, sacrificial love.
The love that seeks the best for the other person.
Exactly. It seeks the best for the beloved, even when it requires painful confrontation. Think about Paul's rebuke to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 5.
About the man living in sin.
Yes. He warns them that allowing that kind of unchecked sin is corrosive. It's like a little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough. Ignoring it isn't loving. It's actually harmful to the person and the community.
It's a failure of love, in a way.
In a way, yes. But then, conversely, look at Galatians 6.1. Believers are told to restore someone caught in sin.
With gentleness.
With gentleness. And the Greek word used there for restore is katartizu.
What does that mean?
It means to mend, to set a moan, like a doctor resetting a fracture.
Wow. So discipline, at its best, is healing.
Exactly. It aims for restoration, not rejection. And this connects correction directly to spiritual formation, to sanctification, as the writer of Hebrews says.
Back to Hebrews 12.
Yeah, verse 11. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace.
A harvest of righteousness and peace.
It's the fire that purifies, not consumes.
Yeah.
It's painful, yes, but it's the necessary path, the road to maturity. It's the discomfort that ultimately leads to real growth.
Okay, covenant, correction, now communion. Often, for many of us, this is maybe a quiet, reflective ritual, end of the service.
Mm-hmm.
But the sources paint a much bigger picture. They say communion isn't merely a quaint ritual, it's the sacramental manifestation of koinonia.
Koinonia, that deep fellowship, participation, shared life.
Right. Communion is the visible heartbeat of invisible unity. And here's a complex but maybe crucial point. 1 Corinthians describes it as an ontological participation in Christ's body and blood, not just symbolic. What does ontological really mean here?
Ontological refers to being, to existence, to reality itself. So it's saying this participation isn't just remembering something or using a symbol. It touches our actual being, our deepest reality. It's a real, tangible connection somehow to the very essence of Christ's sacrificed body and shed blood.
It's profound.
It is. The Lord's Supper is described as the visible, edible renewal of the covenant. When Jesus held up the cup and said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood,"
Luke 22.
he was instituting this powerful act, an act that does multiple things. It proclaims his death until he comes.
1 Corinthians 11.
Right. It receives his present grace right now. And it anticipates that future ultimate celebration, the marriage supper of the Lamb.
Revelation 19. Wow. So it connects past, present, and future.
All in one act. It's an active participation across time and space.
And it's explicitly communal, isn't it? Not individualistic.
Absolutely not. Because there is one loaf, we who are many are one body. That's 1 Corinthians 10.12.
One love, one body.
Our sources are really clear on this. To take communion while you're holding on to disunity or bitterness towards others in the body, that's dangerous. It's eating and drinking judgment on yourself.
Why? Because it requires
Discerning the body, both Christ's physical body given for us and the church, his body here on earth. You can't separate your vertical relationship with God from your horizontal relationships within the community.
That's a huge challenge.
It is.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really transformative, I think, and stretches beyond just the Sunday service. The sources show how communion is meant to stretch into the fabric of everyday life. Think about the early church again. Acts 2.46. They broke bread daily in their homes.
Daily. In home.
Daily. With glad and generous hearts. They were blending the formal liturgy with everyday hospitality. This suggests that every meal, potentially, can become a kind of mini-altar, an echo of the Lord's table, a conscious act of sharing life together.
So living sacramentally, what does that look like?
It means cultivating this constant awareness of God's presence, not just in church, but in all things. Taking that table fellowship, that communion, out into the world.
Wow. Practically?
Well, it means extending communion through acts like speaking truth, but with gentleness. Serving others with real humility, remembering Christ who washed feet. Listening deeply to people, bearing one another's burdens, like Galatians 6 says, forgiving generously 70 times 7.
All of these things.
All of these are a continuation of the Lord's Supper into a broken world. It's seeing the sacred, the presence of Christ, in the ordinary, mundane interactions of life.
It really does all weave together, doesn't it? These three strands.
It has to. The sources powerfully reinforce how covenant, correction, and communion must be intricately woven together. You can't really have one without the others, not in a healthy way.
Right. Because covenant without correction breeds sentimentality. It's all warm feelings, maybe, but no real growth, no accountability, no teeth.
Exactly. And correction without communion leads to legalism, just rules, judgment, no grace, no shared life or joy, cold and harsh.
And communion without covenant collapses into emotionalism. You get maybe a temporary high, a feeling, but there's no depth, no lasting structure, no real commitment holding it together.
Precisely. But when you integrate them, when they're working together, that's when you get what our sources call a resilient ecclesiology.
A resilient ecclesiology.
Right.
A strong way of being the church.
Yes, a robust, thriving understanding and practice of what it means to be the church. And crucially, it forms disciples, not consumers. People who are being changed, not just showing up for a service.
This makes me think of that other triad the sources mentioned, kind of moving beyond the potluck again.
Ah, yes, the indispensable triad of leadership, liturgy, and life together.
Right. How do they parallel or connect to covenant, correction, communion? They seem equally essential.
They are. They form another dynamic system that undergirds the first triad. Think of it like this. Leadership without liturgy, without the rhythms of worship and prayer, it just becomes pragmatic control. Management, strategy without soul.
Okay.
Liturgy without life together, without real community sharing life, becomes empty form, just going through the motions, ritual for ritual's sake, disconnected from reality.
Right, performance.
And life together without leadership, without guidance and theological grounding, it just loses coherence. It drifts aimlessly theologically and ethically. It doesn't know where it's going or why.
And when these foundations, leadership, liturgy, life together, start to crumble, the dangers are pretty stark, aren't they?
They are. The sources point directly to things like weak accountability structures. What does that lead to? Often personality-driven leadership, the suppression of any dissent, and eventually a complete disintegration of trust.
We've unfortunately seen that play out too many times.
Far too many. Then there's doctrinal drift. The church becomes unmoored, like that image of a lighthouse with no foundation. It loses its bearings.
And the danger of unchecked power.
Yes. Authority without clear boundaries, without accountability. That inevitably leads to abuse and fracture. These aren't just theoretical threats, they are real dangers with devastating consequences, seen throughout history and, sadly, today.
But there's hope, right? There are remedies.
Absolutely. The good news is there are remedial measures. Our sources highlight things like robust governance models.
What does that look like?
Things like having plural elder boards, not just one person in charge. Having transparent bylaws. Implementing clear biblical processes like Matthew 18 for dealing with conflict and sin. Structure that protects.
Okay, accountability built in.
Exactly. Then there's doctrinal integrity. Recovering the value of historic creeds, confessions, maybe catechesis teaching the core beliefs, providing a confessional spine for the church. Knowing what you believe and why.
Getting grounded again.
Yes. And finally, actively practicing mutual accountability and church discipline, but doing it as grace in action, seeing it as part of loving restoration, not just punishment.
So these aren't just like bureaucratic fixes.
And not at all. They're described as sacred strategies for ecclesial renewal. They are fundamentally spiritual practices aimed at the health and faithfulness of the community.
Wow. Okay, what a deep dive this has truly been. We've really unpacked this blueprint, maybe, for a community that doesn't just survive, but flourishes. That's resilient.
Anchored in covenant.
Shaped by correction.
And sustained by communion.
And seeing how these aren't actually restrictive, like we might first think, but they're the very architecture needed for a vibrant, spirit-filled life together. It's really reframed how I think about church structures.
And, in a world that feels increasingly marked by social fragmentation, by, frankly, ecclesiological shallowness and so much relational fatigue,
Yeah, people are tired.
They are, but the church has this profound opportunity, a chance to really shine, not primarily through, slick programming or digital innovation.
Important as those might be sometimes.
Right, but fundamentally by embodying this different kind of life, this deeply committed, corrective, yet gracious, communion-centered life. That is the holy staying power that offers a real alternative to disposable commitments and rampant individualism. It offers something substantial the world is longing for, even if it doesn't know it.
So here's a final thought, maybe a provocative one for you, our learner, to mull over. Consider what it would really mean for you not just to talk about community or wish for it, but to actually become it,
Mm.
to embody it.
Yeah. How might you personally choose to reject what the sources call that structure-free spirituality, the appetizer, and instead embrace the sacred strength of belonging with structure, the main course?
It's a conscious choice.
It is. How might embodying these foundational principles, covenant, correction, communion, how might embodying them daily, not just on Sunday, but in the everyday stuff, how might that truly transform your own life and the communities you're part of? Making them that vibrant dwelling place for God by the Spirit that the world so desperately needs right now, let that woven cord hold fast.